Hello, Cliff Goldstein, and I'm glad you tuned in. I just recently read a book by a fellow named Sean Carroll, whose basic argument is that our entire universe, our entire existence, everything, human life included, is nothing but the result of accidents. It's accidents all the way down. The book is titled A Series of Fortunate Events, Chance and the Making of the Planet, Life, and You. Sean Carroll, the author, recently hosted an online seminar that was based on the book. And this is what he put on the seminar, the promo for it. Like every species, we humans are here by accident. But it's shocking just how many things, any of which might never occurred, had to happen in certain ways for any of us to exist. From an extremely improbable asteroid impact to wild gyrations of the Ice Age to invisible accidents, Sean B. Carroll will explore how we are here through an astonishing series of fortunate events. Fortunate, but accident all the same. In other words, the whole point of this seminar, which was related to his book, was that you and I and frogs and duck-billed platypuses and every other form of life on Earth, we are here purely and totally by accident. Just a bunch of freak events that did not have to happen, were not planned, and did not have us in mind. And that's the only reason we are here, period. Okay? In other words, the bottom line is this assumption that we are accidents. It's believed by the world's cognoscenti with the fervid dogmatism that I believe is inversely proportional to the evidence, has become as ingrained in the intellectual architecture, for the past 75 years as the idea that the Earth sat immovable in the center of the universe had been there for centuries as well. I mean, people were utterly sure that the Earth sat immobile at the center of the universe. And the thing too is, folks, they had pretty good scientific evidence for that belief as well. And they were just as sure that we exist here only by accident, the same way they were sure of that as well, okay? That accidents billions, millions of years ago is how life started on our Earth. In other words, don't miss this point, despite the overwhelming functionality of life, from the human hypothalamus to the monarch butterfly, all of which cry design, designer, and purpose louder than an iPhone does, because all are more complicated than an iPhone. But nope, no design, the monarch butterfly, with all the inherent life in one cell, much less the whole butterfly, the beauty, the functionality, everything in it, it all happened, we are assured, dogmatically, by chance. It sure looks designed, but it's just, we're told, the illusion of design. It's an illusion, okay? And these scientists, backed up with libraries of peer-reviewed papers, and how dare you challenge peer-reviewed stuff? They argue that the beauty, the complexity, everything, no matter for seeing, the eyes for seeing, the ears for hearing, air for breathing, these arose purely by chance with no more thought going into it than a painting by Suda the elephant, okay? It all arose with no forethought at all. And lucky us, our eyes happen to see, our ears happen to hear, and we have air to breathe, okay? I'm sorry, it takes an incredible amount of indoctrination and faith to look at even a grapefruit, the seeds of a potentially infinite number of grapefruits in it, to believe that the seeds, the beauty, the taste, the nutritional value were all purely accidents as opposed to having been created. Yet what we are told and what mainstream biological science declares is that it's accidents. And woe, woe, woe to the poor schnook who dares to insinuate, maybe there really might be a little design. You do that and you are going to face the equivalent of the guillotine, okay? Well, anyway, here's what Carroll writes in the book. Pure chance, absolutely free but blind, at the very root of the stupendous edifice of evolution. This central concept of modern biology is no longer one among other even conceivable hypotheses. It is today the sole conceivable hypothesis, the only one that squares with observed and tested fact. And nothing warrants the supposition or the hope that on this score our position is likely to ever be revised. I'm sorry. I think even scientists who might believe what he said there would find this statement reckless and irresponsible, and it's certainly not a scientific statement. It's a philosophical statement coming in the coverage of the name of science. Anyway, that's it. No questions asked. No questions asked. It's absolutely certain. Not more than 100 years ago, 120 years ago, they were utterly certain of the ether. Nobody dared question the existence of the ether. Now the idea of the ether sounds like it came out of mythology. Anyway, that's how much science changes. Okay. And again, Carroll continues. We have learned much more about the history and workings of the planet. We have been startled to discover how the course of life has been buffeted by a variety of cosmological and geological accidents, without which we would not be here. And anyway, these accidents, these series of fortunate events, is what he's named his book for. He insists these are the reasons, and the only reasons, that life is here. And he said it all began with the giant asteroid that 66 billion years ago, he says, crashed into the Earth. Okay, that's where he begins it. Well, I don't mean to throw a fly in the ointment or nothing, but he starts there. But I guess the question I have is, where did the universe and the asteroid and the Earth come from? But I don't want to bother you with details, okay? He starts out 66 billion years ago, the asteroid crashes into the Earth, okay? And then what happens? He describes what he believes happened 66 million years ago. A thick curtain of ejecta traveling 1,000 miles, right after the asteroid hit the Earth. This is what happened. A thick curtain of ejecta traveling at several thousand miles per hour rained down across parts of North America, while impact plume consisting of superheated air, carbon dioxide, water, and sulfur, vaporized rock, and chunks of target rock shot ejecta at velocity greater than the Earth's escape velocity. 25,000 miles per hour into and beyond the atmosphere, which then fell back down towards the surface of the globe as trillions of red-hot meteors for hours. The immediate effect of this molten rain was to heat the temperature of the atmosphere to that of a broiling oven, 400 to 600 degrees Fahrenheit, and that the heat and falling debris was sufficient to ignite dry tinder and spark wildfires across the globe. Okay, remember, this was something that occurred supposedly 66 million years ago. So it hits and all this stuff goes up and the temperatures and all that. I'd say there's a little bit of speculation in here. Seeing is that he or nobody was here at the time to see this. Anyway, you can imagine, though, with the Earth being 400 to 600 degrees Fahrenheit, what it did to life on the planet. Well, yup, it wiped out most life, including dinosaurs, 400, 600 degrees. But despite this, some creatures survived. Some birds, some snakes, some crocodiles and turtles, and even some mammals survived. And those mammals eventually evolved into yours truly and everybody else that you know. Now, how these animals could survive in those temperatures, with 400 to 600 degrees Fahrenheit, he doesn't say. But, science says it, and woe be the schnook that dares question science saying it. Anyway, he writes, important clues have come from considering the lifestyle of those creatures that did make it. Crocodiles and turtles fared better than their larger land-dwelling dinosaur cousins, which were completely wiped out. Snakes as a group also made it through the crisis. The few birds that made it appear to have been small, burrowing, ground-dwelling species or shorebirds. The mammals that made it were also small, probably burrowers as well. So it seems that though the temperatures across the Earth were 400 to 600 degrees Fahrenheit, some of these birds and some of these creatures survived anyway because somehow they were able to burrow a few feet into the Earth and survive, okay? That was it. That was the first accident in a series of fortunate events. I guess if you were a dinosaur, you might have thought it was so fortunate, but we're not going to get into that. Anyway, then he said climate change came, and it started cooling everything down or changing what was hot. And then one of the events was that what happened next was, after this, the entire Indian subcontinent, which had been down by Madagascar, moved over and boing, slammed into Asia. And that collision, the whole continent collision, slammed into Asia, and that created the Himalaya mountains. And those mountains helped cool the Earth down and bring the Ice Age, okay? Here he writes, again, this was all millions and millions of years ago. He said the forces drove the Indian continent northward at the unusually fast rate of 18 to 20 centimeters per year until it collided with Asia, about just 40 million years ago. And they said that this collision changed the world, and then it put more CO2 in the atmosphere, and that just, changed everything, and that was just a geological fluke, an accident. But out of the result of that fluke, after the asteroid caused the continent to slam into the other, and voila, here we are. Okay, this was the second major fortunate event, an accident that millions and millions of years ago brought us here, okay? And now there's only another fortunate accident, evolution. Okay, from now on in, everything comes through evolution. You have two eyes that are able to see a certain wavelength. Accident of evolution. You see beauty, accident, evolution. The fact that our stomachs have enzymes and digestive juices that just happen to work very well in digesting the fruit and everything that grows on the ground. Accidents. Everything here was pure accidents. And yet, here we are. Talk about a series of fortunate events. Again, none of this was planned. None of it was thought out. From the start, all the forces that brought us here, even to this moment, including the formation of the human brain and human consciousness, were all accidents. Now, I don't want to be picky here. Who am I? Who am I to dare to challenge, such an eminent person as this? But think about this with me. If we are accidents, if everything from ground up is accidents, then our brains and the minds that mysteriously come out of our brains, then they are accidents as well. So think about this, because this is exactly where I want to go. And what I'm saying boils down, everything I'm saying boils down to this point. If what this man says is true, and I personally think it's 6 levels below myth, but if what this man says is true, then that we're all here by accidents, then you have absolutely no reason to believe that that's what happened. Because if our bodies, our bodies are beliefs, our beliefs that arise out of our mind, they're products of our minds, and our minds are part of our bodies, and our bodies and all their function from the cells on up are nothing but accidents. If it's accidents all the way down and all the way up too, why should we believe these thoughts that we have, which are just accidents as well? Okay, in short, if what he said were true, then we have no reason to believe anything at all, including the belief that we are accidents. In fact, if what he said were true, we would not have any reason for our belief that we are accidents, or you'd have no reason to believe that they're false either. In other words, nothing we would have to believe, nothing we believe, we have any logical, rational reason to believe, because it's all accidents. Okay, I want you to think about it like this. I got this image from somewhere else, but I like it. And this is what I'm trying to say. Imagine you're walking along a road, you're walking in some woods, and you see etched in a cliff the words, "Danger, falling rocks ahead." Okay? Falling rocks ahead. There's only uno problemo, amigo. These words, you're told, were carved in the rocks by years of erosion from a waterfall that, due to drought, had dried up. Okay? So there are these words, by chance etched, saying, "Danger, rocks falling ahead." Would you have any reason to believe it? Why would you believe it? It was there purely by chance. Erosion purely by chance etched it out. Okay? You might want to take a picture of it, whatever, and look at it, but why would you have any reason to believe it? Okay? It was just by chance that it happened to say falling rocks ahead? Well, it's an analogy, but I think it's a good one. And in the same way, if we're here by the accident, the result of the same unguided process that just happened to etch danger falling rocks ahead, and I mean, the odds of that you think are pretty slim. Well, the odds of that are 10,000 times greater, I think, than the idea of a human cell just evolving out of forces, but that's a separate issue. But you see, the point is, you would have no reason to believe what those rocks said, no reason not to believe it, okay? If humans are here by accident, as this man dogmatically asserts, remember he said nobody's got any reason now to think we're ever going to change that view. But again, why should we believe what he said when that belief is an accident as well, okay? We have no more to believe anything. Again, why trust our accidental minds in what our minds in an accidental universe tell us? Especially if millions of years ago one of these accidents had turned out differently, which means we might have had a different belief today than we would have had. We have a different belief today than we would have had the accident turned out differently, okay? Suppose the eroded cliff said suppose it said no falling rocks ahead. We'd have no more reason to believe that than we believe if it said falling rocks ahead. You have no reason to believe these whatsoever. You know, author Stephen Meyer, in his book, Return of the God Hypotheses, he wrote that Darwin, the one who started his belief all this nonsense anyway. Well, actually, he didn't start it. People believed it earlier. Darwin supposedly gave a scientific answer to it, but that's another story. But Darwin understood the implications of his theory if it were true. Meyer wrote this. In his autobiography, Darwin worried about a closely related problem. He wondered how we could trust the reliability of our cognitive faculties if they had evolved from the minds of lower animals. As he explained in a letter to a friend, quote, "But then with me the horrid doubt always arises whether the conviction of man's mind, which has been developed from the mind of lower animals, are of any value or at all trustworthy. Why would one trust in the conviction of a monkey's mind if there are any convictions in such a mind?" So really, in the end, Darwin's theory, if it were true, would leave us with a powerful nagging doubt about why we should believe it, or why we should, if this belief were nothing but the result of an evolved animal mind arising from a series of accidents, then again, there's no real reason to trust it. You know, over the years, I've read other thinkers, some pro, some anti-evolution, who have expressed this concern. In fact, after I read his book, I wrote to Sean Carroll, and I asked him this very question. Well, you know, brother, I mean, if what you're saying is true, and we're all accidents, why should we believe anything? Why should we believe what you say? I think it was a fair, reasonable question. We could see even Darwin himself worried about it. And yet, for whatever reason, he never answered me. I guess, what could he say? See, this whole idea, kind of the great metaphysical foundation of so much modern thought, that we are exact accidents and no God involved, it kind of in a very powerful way refutes itself. Like the postmodern idea that there's no overarching truth. And that would include the overarching idea that there's no overarching truth. In other words, if Carol said, if what Carol writes is true, that we would be just another accident, if it were true, then we have no reason whatsoever to believe him any more than we would believe if we were told erosion carved out in rocks, no falling rocks ahead. Why would we believe it? You know, in contrast to all this, John 1:1 reads, "In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God." Interesting enough, the Greek term logos, the word for word, in the beginning was the logos. And you know, that means, in Greek, that means kind of, it's a very broad word, but it means Greeks believed in kind of a universal logic, a universal reason. I mean, you don't need to be Aristotle to look around and see a certain logic, a certain reason to aspects of the creation. The Greeks weren't stupid. They could look around and they could see a kind of logic, a reason, principles in reality. And we know from the story of Mars Hill, though, that even though they saw that, they didn't know the God who was behind it all. But John did, and that's why he used the word logos. In short, our minds, which were created by God, give us very good reasons to believe in him. In contrast to Sean Carroll and the whole evolutionary edifice, if it were true, then we would really logically, reasonably have no reason to believe it. In fact, I think we've got plenty of good logical reasons not to believe it.